They called it the subtraction equation. For 200 years, every ship that attempted a blind jump through the Kessler void came back as a perfect geometric ghost, or didn't come back at all. The mathematics were simple, terrifying, and absolute. Any vessel attempting the shortcut would be deleted from reality, piece by piece, as if the universe itself was solving for a variable that didn't want to exist. The Galactic Council had classified the void as a natural law, like gravity or entropy. You don't argue with math. You don't survive it. Until a human named Elias Voss filed a flight plan that made the Council's lead xenomathematician laugh so hard she ruptured a lung sac. The observation deck of the Hand of Reason smelled like recycled ammonia and the faint, bitter tang of fear sweat from 3 different species. Commander Tvish of the Verdun Collective stood at the main viewport, her 3 hearts beating in slow, deliberate synchronization, a meditative rhythm she'd cultivated over 70 standard cycles. Below her, spread out like a wound on the fabric of space, was the Kessler void. It didn't look like much. Just a patch of darkness slightly darker than the rest. A region where stars seemed to shy away, their light bending at angles that made no sense on any known chart. But Tvish knew better. She'd seen the recordings. The brilliant sun, a Gorax heavy cruiser with a crew of 1,200, had attempted the crossing in year 47 of the unified calendar. The ship emerged 3 days late with its aft section replaced by a perfect mathematical void, as if someone had taken a compass, drawn a circle around the rear third, and simply deleted everything inside. The crew that remained had no memory of the missing section. They didn't even realize they were dying until their own biology tried to pump blood through veins that no longer existed. The void didn't destroy ships. It subtracted them. Commander, Tvish's secondary eyelids blinked sideways, a gesture of mild irritation. Her science officer, a small crustacean-like being named Krillix, skittered up beside her, its eye stalks twitching toward the data slate in its manipulator claw. The human has filed his flight plan. Tvish felt her primary heart skip. Which human? The one they sent last week. The pilot. Voss. She'd almost forgotten about him. Almost. The humans had petitioned for membership in the Galactic Council 6 times over the past 3 decades. And 6 times they'd been denied. Not out of malice. The Council didn't waste malice on species that couldn't even agree on a single planetary government. No, the humans had been denied because they were useful in the way a sharp rock was useful. Primitive. Stubborn. Possessed of a biological resilience that bordered on the pathological, but utterly lacking in the kind of disciplined, collective reasoning that defined true galactic civilization. They made good laborers, decent soldiers in a pinch. But they weren't thinkers. They weren't scientists. When the Council needed someone to crawl into a radiation-leaking conduit or test a new atmospheric scrubber on a death world, they called a human. The humans, desperate for legitimacy, always said yes. Tvish had voted against their admission herself. Twice. What exactly is he filing a flight plan for? She asked, already dreading the answer. Krillix's eye stalks dipped in what passed for embarrassment among his species. He intends to cross the void. He believes he has a mathematical solution. The observation deck fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the life support systems seemed to pause. Show me, Tvish said. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting a 3-dimensional map of the Kessler void and the space around it. The standard route, the safe route, curve around the void's event horizon like a shy river avoiding a cliff, adding 18 standard days to any journey between the galactic core and the outer reach. The humans' proposed path, highlighted in angry red, went straight through. Tvish studied the numbers floating beside the projection. They were wrong. Not just optimistic or ill-advised, but mathematically insane. The human was attempting to treat the void not as a subtraction problem, but as a division problem, breaking his ship's mass into discrete packets and staggering their transit across multiple timelines. The theory was elegant in the way a child's drawing of a starship was elegant. It captured the basic shape of the idea while completely failing to understand the forces involved. He'll die, Tvish said flatly. Krillix clicked its mandibles. The human mathematical attaché, a female named Chun, insists the solution is valid. She claims to have found a pattern in the void subtraction algorithm, a repeating prime sequence that suggests the void is not a natural phenomenon, but a constructed one. That got Tvish's attention. Constructed? By whom? Unknown. The pattern suggests a creator, but the signature is unlike any known species. Chun believes the void may be a security system, a door that only opens to those who understand the lock. Tvish turned back to the viewport, staring at that impossible darkness. A door. The idea was absurd. And yet, something in her hindbrain, the ancient part that had kept her ancestors alive on a world of predators and volcanic winters, was whispering that the human might be onto something. She hated that whisper. Where is he now? Krillix pointed one claw toward the docking bay, preparing his ship. He calls it the uncertainty principle. Of course he does. The docking bay smelled like ozone, burned coffee, and something that Tvish's translator identified as sweat mixed with anxiety and cheap stimulants. The human ship was a mess. Not in the way that Verdant ships were messes, cluttered but organized, with every tool in its designated spot and every surface scrubbed to sterile perfection. No, this was a human mess. Cables ran along the walls in colorful tangles. Screens displayed handwritten notes in a language that seemed to consist entirely of acronyms and profanity. A half-eaten ration bar had been stuck to the ceiling with what appeared to be chewing gum. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed and his hands resting on his knees, was Elias Voss. He was younger than Tvish had expected. Humans aged poorly. Their skin wrinkled, their hair fell out, their joints rebelled against gravity. But this one still had the smooth face and restless energy of early adulthood. He was thin, almost gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous twitch in his left hand that made him look like he was constantly trying to wave away a small insect. He opened his eyes when Tvish entered. They were brown, unremarkable, and yet there was something in them that made her secondary hearts flutter, a kind of focused chaos like watching a supernova through a telescope and realizing you're much closer than you thought. Commander, he said, unfolding himself on the floor with a grunt. Thanks for coming. I know you probably think I'm crazy. I think you're going to die, Tvish corrected. Crazy is a luxury for species with redundant organ systems. Voss laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that made Krillix flinch. Fair enough. You want to see the math? He didn't wait for an answer. He crossed to one of the cluttered screens and tapped it with a grease-stained finger. The display lit up with equations that made Tvish's visual cortex ache. Here's the thing everyone gets wrong about the void, Voss said, his voice taking on the rapid-fire cadence of someone who'd been thinking about nothing else for weeks. They treat it like subtraction. Ship goes in, ship comes out minus something. But that's not what's happening. Subtraction is just how it looks to an outside observer. What's actually happening is more like... He paused, searching for words. Like the void is taking a snapshot of your ship at entry and exit, comparing the two, and deleting anything that doesn't match. It's not random. It's efficient. The void is trying to solve for the shortest possible path between 2 points in space-time, and it's deleting anything that complicates that path. Tvish stared at the equations. They were not wrong. Not entirely. The human had identified a pattern in the void's behavior that her own mathematicians had missed, probably because her mathematicians had been too busy being terrified to look closely. But the solution he proposed, you're planning to break your ship into quantum pieces and send each piece through a different timeline, she said slowly. That's not piloting. That's suicide with extra steps. Voss grinned. It was an ugly expression, all teeth and no warmth. That's what everyone says. But Chun figure out the key. The void isn't looking for the shortest path. It's looking for the most probable path. If we can make the improbable seem more probable, the void's math breaks down. It gets confused. And when math gets confused, you get an opening. He tapped the screen again, and the holographic display showed a simulation, A small ship approaching the void, its hull shimmering as it split into overlapping probability states. The void's mathematics reached out to delete the ship, but instead of finding a single, coherent target, it found 1,000 possible ships occupying the same space. The subtraction algorithm tried to solve for all of them at once, and the simulation glitched, a beautiful, cascading failure of logic that left the ship intact on the other side. Krillix's eye stalks shot straight up. That's not possible. The energy requirements alone. When not using energy, Voss interrupted. We're using uncertainty. Heisenberg's old trick. The more precisely you measure a particle's position, the less precisely you can measure its momentum. The void is trying to measure our position with perfect accuracy. So we're giving it a position that doesn't exist. Au quantum folk. By the time it figures out what we actually are, we're already through. Fish felt a headache building behind her primary eyes. And if you're wrong? Voss shrugged. Then, the void deletes us. But here's the thing, Commander. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and see the individual flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Chun, and I ran the numbers 100 times. Every time, the survival probability came out the same. 0.37%. That's not a survival probability. That's a death sentence. No. Voss shook his head slowly. That's a chance. 0.37% is still a chance. And humans are really, really good at beating the odds. It's kind of our thing. Twish didn't sleep that night. She stood on the observation deck, watching the uncertainty principle drift toward the void's event horizon. And she thought about the 6 times she'd voted against human membership. She thought about the reports she'd read, the way humans could survive for weeks on nothing but water and their own body fat, the way they could heal from wounds that would kill a Verdant in minutes, the way they kept trying even when every logical calculation told them to stop. She thought about the human concept of grit. She'd always dismissed it as a primitive survival instinct, something left over from their days as cave-dwelling predators. But watching Voss's ship grow smaller against that impossible darkness, she wondered if she'd been wrong. Maybe grit wasn't a weakness. Maybe it was the universe's way of saying that some things mattered more than math. The uncertainty principle reached the event horizon at 0347 ship time. Tvish watched as the ship's running lights flickered once, twice, and then vanished into the void's embrace. She waited. The observation deck's chronometer ticked past 1 minute. 2, 5, 10. Krillix skittered up beside her, its data slate glowing with frantic calculations. Commander, the ship's quantum signature is still present. It's a pause. It's fluctuating. The void subtraction algorithm is trying to engage, but something is interfering. The probability states are multiplying faster than the void can resolve them. How long can he keep that up? I don't know. The energy expenditure must be enormous. At current rates, the ship's reactor will reach critical failure in. Krillix's eye stalks went limp. 7 minutes. Tvish watched the void. Watched that terrible darkness that had devoured so many ships, so many lives. And for the first time in her long career, she found herself hoping. Not hoping that the human would succeed. That was statistically impossible. Hoping that he would survive. That he would emerge from that darkness, battered and broken, and prove that the universe still had room for miracles. The chronometer ticked past 15 minutes. 20, 30. And then, without warning, the uncertainty principle reappeared. It came out spinning, its hull scorched and dented, one of its engine nacelles trailing a ribbon of vaporized coolant. The ship looked like it had been through a war and lost, but it was there. Whole. Undelete. Fish's 3 hearts stuttered in her chest. Open a channel, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Krillix's claws flew across its slate. Channel open, Commander. Static. Then a cough. Then Voss's voice, rough and exhausted but unmistakably alive. Hey, Commander. You get all that? Because I think I figured something out about the void that you're really not gonna like. The debriefing room aboard the Hand of Reason was designed for comfort, or at least for the kind of comfort that a Verdant, a Gorax, and a Zillion could agree on. The chairs were adjustable, The atmosphere was breathable for all three species, though the Gorax representative kept coughing, and the lighting was a compromise between the Verdant preference for dim blue and the Zillion need for ultraviolet. Humans had not been considered in the design. Humans, after all, were not members. Elias Voss sat in a chair that was slightly too small for him, his legs stretched out, his hands wrapped around a cup of something brown that he claimed was coffee, but that smelled to Tvish's nostrils like burnt plant matter and desperation. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and there was a bruise spreading across his left cheek that he hadn't had before the jump. But he was smiling. That same ugly, teeth-bearing smile that made Tvish want to hit him and hug him in equal measure. "You want to explain," said Ambassador Gore the Gorax, his massive body taking up 3 chairs, "how you survive something that mathematically cannot be survived?" Voss took a long sip of his coffee. "Sure, but first, I need you to understand something about the void." He set the cup down and leaned forward, his eyes moving from face to face. "It's not a natural phenomenon, Chun, and I suspected that before the jump, but now I know for sure. The void is a trap, a security system designed by someone, or something, that didn't want anyone passing through. The Zillion Ambassador, a being of shifting light and angular geometry, flickered with irritation. "This is speculation. You have no evidence. I have the jump data." Voss pulled a small data crystal from his pocket and tossed it onto the table. It skittered across the surface and came to rest in front of Krillix. "Run it through your best analysis algorithms. You'll see the pattern. The void doesn't just subtract matter, it learns. Every ship that enters teaches it something new about how to delete the next one. That's why the survival rate has gone down over time. It's not random chance. It's evolution." Krillix snatched up the crystal and plugged it into a portable reader. Its eye stalks twitched as the data scrolled across its internal display. After a long moment, it let out a sound that was somewhere between a wheeze and a scream. "Commander, he's right. The subtraction algorithm has been optimizing itself for centuries. The pattern is unmistakable." The room went very quiet. Fish felt her primary heart clench. If the void was learning, if it was actively improving its ability to kill, then the Council's policy of simply avoiding it was no longer sufficient. Because the void wasn't static. It was growing. And eventually, it would grow large enough to swallow the safe routes as well. "How do we stop it?" she asked. Voss's smile faded. "That's the part you're not going to like. We can't stop it. Not with conventional weapons, not with shields, not with anything in your fleet. The void exists in a state of quantum superposition. It's both here and not here, both real and conceptual. Shooting at it would be like trying to kill a number with a bullet. Then what do you suggest?" Ambassador Gorn growled. Voss looked at Tvish. Just looked at her, those brown eyes steady and strange. "We go through it. All of us. Every ship in the Council fleet, loaded to the gills with refugees and supplies. We go through the void, and we come out the other side, and we keep going until we find whoever built this thing and ask them what the hell they were thinking." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient hum of the life support seemed to hold its breath. "That's insane," said the Zillion Ambassador, its light flickering into a pattern that Tfish's translator identified as deep distress. "You're asking us to risk our entire civilization on a 0.37% chance." "No." Voss shook his head. "I'm asking you to trust me. The 0.37% was for one ship, one pilot, no preparation. But we've got something now that no one else has ever had. We got data. We've got a map of the void's learning algorithm. And we've got something else." He tapped his chest, right over his heart. "We've got a human who's been inside the math and come back. I know where the weak points are. I know how to confuse the algorithm, how to make it hesitate. And hesitation is all we need." Tvish stared at him. She thought about the 6 times she'd voted against human membership. She thought about the way the Council had used humans as disposable labor, as cannon fodder, as test subject for dangerous experiments. She thought about the way Elias Voss looked right now. Exhausted, bruised, possibly concussed, and absolutely certain that he could save them all. "Show me," she said. "Show me the path." The planning took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of 18-hour days, of arguments and accusations and walkouts, of diplomats threatening to recall their fleets and scientists screaming at each other over coffee-stained data slates. 3 weeks of Tvish watching Elias Voss work himself to the bone, sleeping in 4-hour bursts, eating ration bars while explaining quantum probability to a room full of species who had spent centuries perfecting the art of saying no. And slowly, impossibly, the plan came together. The fleet would consist of 147 ships, every vessel in the Council's inventory that could be made ready in time. They would carry 2 million civilians, the last remnants of species whose homeworlds had already been consumed by the void's slow expansion. They would jump simultaneously, their quantum signatures linked through a network of human-designed relays that would amplify the uncertainty effect, creating a fog of probability so dense that even the void's learning algorithm would struggle to find target. Voss would pilot the lead ship. The uncertainty principle, patched and repaired and jury-rigged with components that made Krillix's eye stalks curl in horror, would serve as the fleet's guide. If Voss survived, the others would follow. If he didn't, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Voss said, which Tvish's translator informed her was a human idiom meaning, "We have no plan for that scenario, and are choosing not to think about it." The night before the jump, Tvish found Voss on the observation deck, staring at the void. The darkness seemed closer now, hungrier. She could almost feel it watching them. "You should be resting," she said. Voss didn't turn around. "Can't sleep. Too much math in my head." Tvish moved to stand beside him. Up close, she could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping under his skin. He was terrified. Not the cold, calculated fear of a soldier facing certain death, but something rawer, the fear of a creature that had evolved to run from predators and was now choosing to run straight toward one. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "The Council has done nothing for your species. We've used you, dismissed you, denied you a place at the table. You owe us nothing." Voss was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "When I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days. Before spaceflight, before the Council, back when humans were stuck on one planet with no hope of ever leaving. She told me about a time when a ship called the Endurance got trapped in ice, and the crew survived for 2 years in the Antarctic winter. They ate penguins. They burned blubber for heat. They watched their ship get crushed by the ice, and they still found a way home." He paused. "My grandmother was on that ship. She was the navigator." Tvish blinked. "That's not possible." "The Endurance was destroyed in 1915, Voss finished. Earth calendar. And, yeah, she wasn't actually there. But the story was true. The Endurance was real, and the crew survived, and they made it home because they refused to give up. That's the thing about humans, Commander. We don't give up. We don't know how. We just keep going, even when the math says we can't. Especially when the math says we can't." He turned to face her, and, for the first time, she saw something other than chaos in his eyes. She saw purpose, a kind of terrible, beautiful certainty that made her 3 hearts ache. "The Council doesn't owe me anything," he said. "But those 2 million people on your ships, they deserve a chance. And I'm the only one who can give it to them. So yeah, I'm terrified. I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. But I'm going to die trying because that's what humans do. We try. And sometimes against all logic, we win." Tvish held his gaze for a long moment. Then, she did something she had never done before in her 70 cycles of service. She saluted him. "Then let's go win." The fleet jumped at 0600 ship time. 147 vessels, ranging from the Gorak's dreadnought Hammer of Dawn to the tiny Zillion scout ships that looked like folded origami made of light. They formed a rough sphere around the uncertainty principle, their quantum signatures linked through the human-designed relays, their crews holding their breath as the void's event horizon rushed up to meet them. Tvish stood on the bridge of the Hand of Reason, watching the main view screen. The image was already breaking apart, fragments of reality bleeding into each other as the void's mathematics reached out to claim them. She could feel it in her bones, a cold, precise pressure, like the universe was trying to solve an equation that had her at the center. Quantum links are stable, Krillix reported, its voice tight with fear. The uncertainty field is holding. But the void is adapting faster than predicted. We're seeing subtraction attempts at the periphery of the fleet. 2 ships have already reported hull breaches. Which ships? The Steadfast Heart and the Gentle Persuasion. Both human-crewed. Fish's hearts stopped. Casualties? None. The crews sealed the breaches and continued the jump. They're refusing to drop out. Of course they were. Umans. Gimme Voss, she ordered. The view screen flickered, and Voss's face appeared, pale, sweating, but still wearing that ugly grin. Behind him, Tvish could see the Uncertainty Principle's bridge in chaos. Alarms were screaming. Sparks were falling from overhead conduits. A crew member in a pressure suit was wrestling with a control panel that had apparently caught fire. "Commander," Voss said, his voice crackling with static. "Good news and bad news. Good news is the uncertainty field is working. The void can't decide which of us to delete first. Bad news is that's making it angry. Angry? The void doesn't have emotions. It does now." Voss's grin faded. "Commander, I don't know how to explain this, but the void is learning faster. Every time we confuse it, it adapts. It's like we're teaching it how to fight us. And at the rate it's going to figure out a solution in about," he glanced at a readout, 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The fleet was only halfway through the void. At their current speed, they needed at least 20 minutes to reach the other side. "We need more time," Tvish said. "Can't give you more time. But I can give you a distraction." Voss's eyes met hers through the static. "Commander, I'm going to do something stupid. When I do, you need to take the fleet and run. Don't look back. Don't try to save me. Just run." "Voss, what are you?" The transmission cut off. On the main view screen, Tvish watched the Uncertainty Principle break formation. The small human ship shot forward, straight into the heart of the void, its engines flaring with impossible brightness. And as it went, it began to split. Not physically. Voss had explained the theory, but seeing it was something else entirely. The Uncertainty Principle seemed to exist in 100 places at once, a cascade of overlapping probability states that stretched across the void like a bridge of light. The void's mathematics reached out to delete the ship, but there were too many versions of it, too many possibilities. The algorithm tried to solve for all of them at once, and for a glorious, terrible moment, it broke. The pressure on the hand of reason vanished. The cold, precise feeling of being calculated evaporated like morning mist. "Now!" Krillix screamed. "Commander, the void's defenses are down. We have a window." Tvish didn't hesitate. "All ships, full thrust. Follow the human's path. Go, go, go." The fleet surged forward, 147 vessels pouring through the gap that Elias Voss had torn in the fabric of reality. Behind them, the Uncertainty Principle continued its mad dance, splitting and reforming, confusing and distracting, giving them the time they needed. 8 minutes. 6. 4. The leading ships reached the far edge of the void, their sensors screaming as they tasted normal space for the first time in what felt like years. One by one, they emerged battered, bleeding but alive. The Hammer of Dawn came through with its port side scorched black. Bazillion scouts appeared as flickers of confused light that slowly resolved into solid shapes. The Steadfast Heart and the Gentle Persuasion emerged with their human crews, still aboard, still fighting, still refusing to die. And then the hand of reason broke through, and Tvish felt reality snap back into focus around her. The chronometer showed that only 30 seconds had passed since the jump began, but she felt like she'd aged a lifetime. She turned to look back at the void. The Uncertainty Principle was gone. The darkness was still there, still hungry, still waiting. But the little human ship that had dared to challenge it had vanished, erased from existence like a variable that didn't fit the equation. Tvish's 3 hearts shattered. They found him 3 days later. A search party of Verdun and human ships had combed the space around the Void's exit point, scanning for any sign of the Uncertainty Principle's wreckage. They found nothing. No debris, no life pods, no emergency beacons. Just empty space and the lingering echo of quantum uncertainty. And then a human ensign on the steadfast heart noticed something strange. A faint energy signature, barely above background radiation, drifting at the edge of their sensors. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a life pod. It was a man. Elias Voss floated in the void without a suit, his body curled into a fetal position, his skin covered in a thin layer of ice. His eyes were closed. His chest wasn't moving. By every medical scan, by every logical calculation, he was dead. But the human ensign insisted on bringing him aboard. He's not dead, she kept saying over and over, even as the Verdun medical officers showed her the flatline brain activity, the absent heartbeat, the complete lack of vital signs. He's not dead. He's just resting. They put him in a medical bay and left him there, a courtesy to the humans who had saved their lives. And 6 hours later, Elias Voss opened his eyes. The medics who witnessed it described the moment as disturbing and impossible and the most human thing I've ever seen. Voss sat up, coughed up a pint of frozen fluid, and asked for coffee. When asked how he had survived, he shrugged and said, "I don't know. I just decided not to die." Later, when the medical scans were complete and the official reports had been filed, Voss sat down with Tvish in a quiet observation room and told her what had really happened. "The Void didn't delete me," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "It tried. It definitely tried. But right at the end, when it had me in its math, I did something that confused it. I stopped being a single variable and started being a story." Tvish frowned. A story? A narrative? A sequence of events that didn't follow any logical pattern. The Void's algorithm is designed to solve equations, but it doesn't know what to do with a human being who refuses to be solved. I kept changing, kept surprising myself. Every time I thought I had me figured out, I did something irrational, thought about my grandmother, remembered a joke, sang a song in my head. And the Void couldn't process that. It kept trying to find a pattern, and there was no pattern. Just chaos. Just humanity. He leaned back in his chair and stared out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere behind them, the Void still waited, still hungry, still learning. But for the first time in 200 years, it had been beaten. "The Council is going to hold a vote," Tvish said quietly. "On human membership. I'm going to vote yes." Voss smiled. Not the ugly grin this time, but something softer, something almost gentle. "You don't have to do that." "I know. But I want to." She paused. "You showed us something, Elias Voss. You showed us that the universe isn't just math. It's also stubbornness. It's also hope. It's also a species that refuses to die, even when the numbers say it should." She reached out and placed her primary hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of respect among her people, reserved for warriors who had faced death and won. "The Council didn't understand humans," she said. "We thought you were weak because you were chaotic. We didn't realize that chaos is its own kind of strength. That sometimes the only way to beat the math is to be completely, gloriously irrational." Voss covered her hand with his own. His skin was warm now, the ice long gone, the color returning to his face. "So what happens now?" he asked. Tvish looked out at the stars, at the darkness that still lurked at the edge of their charts, at the unknown creators of the Void, still waiting somewhere in the depths of space. "Now," she said, "we go find whoever built that thing, and we introduce them to the species that survived their equation." She smiled. It felt strange on her face. Verdun weren't built for smiling, but she did it anyway. "And we bring you with us. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humans are very good at surviving things that mathematically should kill them." Elias Voss laughed, and the sound echoed through the observation room, warm and alive and utterly beautifully human. 0.37%, he said. "Never tell me the odds." The Galactic Council granted humanity full membership 7 days later. The vote was unanimous. Ambassador Gorn, who had spent decades arguing against human admission, gave a speech that was later described as reluctantly glowing and the closest a Gorax has ever come to apologizing. He ended with a line that became famous across the galaxy. We thought they were weak because they felt fear. We were wrong. They are strong because they feel fear and choose to act anyway. That is not a weakness. That is the most dangerous thing in the universe. Elias Voss was offered a commission in the Council's combined fleet. He declined, citing a desire to fly small ships into dangerous places and see what happens. The Council, having learned not to argue with humans, gave him a small ship and a budget for coffee. The void remains. It is still hungry, still learning, still waiting. But the galaxy knows now that it can be beaten, not with weapons, not with shields, not with mathematics, but with a pilot who refuses to die, a species that refuses to give up, and a 0.37% chance that somehow, impossibly became 100. And somewhere in the depths of space, the creators of the void are watching. They are recalculating. They are realizing, for the first time, that their equation has found a variable it cannot solve. Humanity, the universe's most beautiful, most terrifying, most irrational mistake. And it is coming for them.